What's wrong, sweetheart? What are you doing here? My daughter had literally taken over an hour to get to the hospital where I'm staying, on foot. Why is she here when she's supposed to be with her daddy? As I listened to my daughter's story about what was going on for the last few weeks, I found out my husband had been lying to me and put his own daughter in danger. I hired a detective who is an old friend of mine to launch an investigation to uncover his lies. And this story is about how my husband betrayed his family and how he paid for that mistake. My name is Cassandra, but many call me Cassie, and I'm a 30-year-old office woman working as executive manager of the Department of Product Manufacturing for a household items company. My job basically consists of keeping constant communication with the factories that make our products en masse. And while I do have to shoulder lots of responsibility, the people whom I collaborate with are awesome business partners, and some are actual friends outside the workplace. All in all, a very good job. I used to live with my husband, Grant, and our daughter, Iris. My husband and I both worked, but because I knew we were going to have a child when we first got married, I looked far and wide to find a job with little overtime work. I should count myself lucky that I found the company for which I work now, because I had no extra hours during the night on weekdays. I spend a lot of time with my daughter, and my husband often goes out with her on his days off to compensate for the lack of time he spends with her during the week. That's why she loved him so much. But recently, my husband has been saying that he's busy at work, which is why he's not at home more and more often. I was always wondering why, since he had never worked overtime before. And while a part of me scolded myself for being suspicious, I couldn't help it. He suddenly started working overtime and on holidays, and it happened very suddenly instead of gradually. I have a friend who's a detective, and I was thinking of asking him for help. Then one evening, my husband came home and asked me and my daughter if we wanted to go on a little family trip for the upcoming holidays. A trip?
What with work and all, we haven't been able to make time for our family lately, so I thought it would be a good idea once in a while.
I get to go on a trip with Mommy and Daddy. I'm so happy. Where do you want to go, Mommy?
If we go on this trip, sweetheart, we're only going to a place you want to go to, okay? She was so happy to hear that and started talking about where she wanted to go. I had nothing to be suspicious about. Grant was simply really busy with his work. But this idea of his made me realize that he was still thinking about us all the time. All my doubts about him disappeared. But 1 week before the holiday trip we were looking forward to, I fell ill at work. I had been feeling under the weather around then. But I just thought it was just a lack of sleep. But in fact, while it wasn't life-threatening, I was diagnosed with an illness that required surgery. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I was looking forward to this trip very much.
Oh, it's all right, Mommy. I'm more worried about your health, so don't worry about it. Just get some rest, okay? I'm going to visit you a lot with Daddy. Won't we, Daddy?
Thank you, darling. Grant, honey, do you think you can take care of Iris for the time being?
Of course. Never you mind. I have everything under control. Just get some rest, all right?
Both of them were very understanding. So I stayed in the hospital and focused on my treatment, even though I still felt sorry for them both. For the last week or so of my stay in the hospital, Iris and Grant came to visit me every other day. She spent a lot of time just talking about what happened at school the last couple of days. And it made me happy, because the scenery never changed. Being in the hospital was so boring. I was certain I would emerge from the hospital physically healthy, but clinically insane. As soon as my husband and my daughter walked in through the door to my room, made it feel as though the hospital room was a dreamland. And once my daughter and husband leave, the boredom settles in again. It takes about an hour to walk from our house to the hospital. My stay in the hospital was to be at least a month, And I was very anxious because I've never been away from my daughter for any amount of time, even remotely close to that. Because the hospital was so far from where we lived, I couldn't see Iris very often in the first place. And then something happened that made me even more anxious. My husband and daughter stopped coming to visit me, and to pile on the bad news, at the same time, I seemed to be disconnected from Grant. I just couldn't get through to him over the phone. I sent him messages too, but either he never read them or they never reached his inbox. On the days I couldn't see my daughter, I always used to call them, using Grant's video phone to see her face, but he couldn't do that anymore. I don't know if maybe it was because he was having a hard time taking care of her, but I was nevertheless worried about whether things were okay or not. A week passed, and still, no phone calls. 2 weeks after I was hospitalized, my husband picked up the phone for once. Oh, thank goodness! I finally got through to you. Grant, how are you? How's Iris?
I'm doing all right, and Iris is doing great. Sorry about the incommunicado. I've been pretty busy with work these days.
Where's Iris? I want to see her face. Is she still awake?
Sorry, honey. I put her to bed about an hour ago. She had soccer in her PE class today, and she was so tired. I'll check on her again and try to get back to you.
Oh, okay. Too bad. I miss her so much. Can we make a video call right now? It's been a while since I've seen the house, and I feel so relieved to see it again.
Sorry, I'm still at the office right now. I went home to check on Iris, and after I put her into bed, I came back. Mind if I call you back?
After I answered no, he hung up on me. I tried calling him several times over the next few days, but the same problem of incommunicado persisted. I was concerned about my daughter's condition, but not being able to leave the hospital was very frustrating. One day, after days of agony, I heard fast-paced footsteps running down the hallway of my hospital room. The footsteps passed by my door and then stopped, and approached the door again from the opposite direction. I apparently had a visitor. And then I heard the sound of crying and sobbing. The voice was familiar to me. There was no doubt about it. The voice belonged to my daughter. Mommy! Mommy! Iris, what's wrong, sweetheart? What are you doing here? Did you walk all the way here?
I walked all the way here by myself. I knew the way because I came a few times with Daddy.
According to Iris, had literally taken over an hour to get to the hospital where I'm staying, on foot. Why did you come alone? Where's Daddy?
Because Daddy is not at home.
He's not at home? What do you mean, sweetheart? I asked her if she meant he hadn't come home yet because he's busy at work, and she said no. He literally hasn't been home at all recently.
I wondered why he bought me lots of boxed lunches and bread and stuff that I liked, but I thought that Daddy was never going to come back. I understood. I feel so lonely being home alone, Mommy.
She began to cry. To sum up everything, she told me Grant was not at home and Iris had spent the last few days all alone in the house. In other words, a child in elementary school, 8 years old, was home alone, eating boxed lunches and assorted sweet bread. When I called Grant a few days prior and he answered, it wasn't that Iris was sleeping, that I couldn't see her. It was that Grant simply wasn't with her. She must have felt so alone, so scared, and so confused about why she was alone. She didn't have a cell phone, which meant she couldn't call anyone, and she thought the only solution to the problem was to go to the hospital herself. And that's why she had to walk all the way from her home. My heart wrenched at the thought of such a calamity. and the anger I felt towards Grant was enormous. What exactly did he hope to accomplish by leaving our daughter alone in the house for multiple days? I hugged her and tried to calm her down. Perhaps the physical labor of walking a whole hour got the better of her, because she fell asleep on my bed next to me, her head on my chest. I took the opportunity to call Grant, and for some reason, he answered the phone almost immediately.
Cassie, what's wrong?
What are you doing right now?
I'm having a nice dinner with Iris. What do you want?
Obviously, Grant was in a bad mood because I'd called him at the moment. I didn't care. I just kept on talking. If you're having dinner with her, can you put her on? He said nothing in response, and he was clearly upset when I said that. His breathing suddenly became heavy and erratic. If you're going to lie, you better lie in a more convoluted way, my dear man. Of course I'd ask him to give the phone to Iris if they were eating together. Now I conclusively knew my husband was lying to me, and that's all I needed to know. You know what? Never mind. I have a big headache. Glad to know you're spending time together, though. Call me again when you can, I said before hanging up the phone. I knew his bad mood was gone just before I killed the line, because his breathing returned to normal, and his tone was calm and soothing when he said,
Take care of yourself.
I supposed he was relieved that he didn't have to give Iris the phone. I was so disgusted with him. After hanging up the phone, I called my parents. I couldn't trust my husband with Iris anymore. I explained the situation to my parents and asked them to take care of their granddaughter. They were thrilled to take her under their wing for a bit, and I knew they would. Iris hadn't seen her grandparents in nearly 6 months. I also urgently asked a detective, who was an old friend of mine, to launch an investigation to uncover his lies. Lo and behold, he called back 15 minutes later with a tiny update. The evidence of Grant's infidelity was rolling in astonishingly quick. I can't thank my friend enough for investigating so quickly, and I urged him to find everything he could. My husband had neglected our daughter and was indulging in adultery with another woman. I was beyond angry by that point. I was disgusted. I didn't tell my husband that my daughter was at home. Still, the fact that I haven't heard from him obviously means that he hasn't come home. To think that it's been a few days and he still hasn't come home is far more dreadful than anything I've ever experienced in my life. I was afraid that Iris may have been alone for a longer time than I was thinking, and the mere thought of it sent shivers down my spine. Some of these shivers consisted of fear of all the things that could have gone wrong while Iris was alone in the house. Some others were of pity for Iris for putting up with that scary time. Others were still of fury towards Grant for doing the unthinkable. But Iris is at my parents' house now, which is a big relief. Then, a few days later, my husband came running into my hospital room.
Hey, Iris is gone.
What do you mean she's gone? If she was there this morning, you could have called the school, right? I told him that, and he was clearly getting impatient. Let's make him even more nervous. Or maybe call the police. She hasn't come to the hospital, honey, so I have no idea where she is. Want me to call the police?
Actually, I think it will be quicker and less of a hassle to ask around the neighborhood instead of going straight to the police. Where is Iris likely to go?
Normally, anyone would feel more comfortable telling the police right away and letting them take care of finding her. But Grant actually refused to go to the police. Yep, he was only thinking of himself. Absolutely pathetic. Iris is not coming back, Grant.
What the hell do you mean?
Iris came to the hospital room alone a few days ago. When I said that, my husband obviously started to get upset. She came here alone because you abandoned her at home and made her feel so lonely. That's why I've asked my parents to take care of her. That's what I told him, making sure the words all sounded like bullets because I wanted to destroy this man's soul.
Then you do know where she is. Why didn't you tell me earlier?
But then he took offense. But I wasn't fazed by that in the slightest. Can you please explain to me why I have to tell you to make you understand? Normally, you'd have known she was gone sooner, right?
I was busy with work.
If you're really too busy with work to even come home at all, you could have called me first, or your in-laws, or your own parents.
Well, I mean, that's...
Well, that's okay, because I already have it all figured out. I proceeded to spread out all of the evidence my detective friend had gathered for me in front of him. The moment he realized what exactly he was looking at, his eyes went wild with panic. But really, the reason why you didn't even notice your daughter was missing was that you were busy having an affair, isn't it? You failed as a husband, as a father, and as a man in general, Mr. Grant Scallion.
No, that's not cheating. That's just a junior colleague at work who told me she needed some advice. So all I ever did was listen to her concerns.
I think that excuse is still going to hold up when you take a freaking look at this. I offered my husband a photograph of the two of them coming out of a hotel. When my husband realized he couldn't use that excuse, he fell to his knees. I want a divorce.
Divorce? No, please. Anything but a divorce, please. I was just having some fun with her. I was never serious.
You weren't serious when you left your own daughter to have an affair with her. What were you gonna do if something happened to my daughter while you were off gallivanting with that bitch clutching your arm like that? I can't be with a man who leaves his daughter and then goes off to someone with whom they're only having some fun.
But you know Iris is not going to have the best childhood if she only has a single parent.
I don't believe the same individual who literally abandoned her in an empty house alone and scared has the right to say such things, Mr. Scallon. The divorce is final, and I'm not going to change my mind. I've asked my parents to hire a lawyer, and we're going to be negotiating the legal procedures through them. I never want to see your pathetic face again. At that instant, my parents came into the room, Iris holding Mom's hand. When she saw her daddy, she started shaking and retreated behind her grandmother, hugging her legs and digging her fingers into her pants. She must have been traumatized from being left alone in a large house for multiple days. My heart started to pound in my chest as I fought back tears at this devastating sight. My own daughter was frightened of her father. I mean, sure, he freaking deserved it, but no child should ever feel that way towards their parents. It's so heartbreaking.
I'm scared, Grandma.
Do you understand now? This is what you did to her.
But I made sure she had plenty of food because I knew she wouldn't be able to eat anything if I left her alone with nothing at her disposal. What's your problem with that? Nowadays, it's becoming a lot more widespread to leave elementary school children at home to fend for themselves for a bit. It helps with independence and autonomy, you know.
My husband actually started to attempt to justify his actions for leaving her at home alone. Iris started to cry when she heard her father's words. Mom kindly took her out of the hospital room, and Dad gave Grant the look, a look of soul-crushing judgment. I never thought he'd be able to say such a thing in front of his daughter. Of the two things I was furious with him about, the affair and his neglect of Iris, the latter was infinitely more important, and the fact that he was trying to prove he was in the right made me struggle to keep my murderous intent from taking over. Iris crying made it especially hard. I swear, another slight nudge in the wrong direction and I would have lost all control. So that's how you really feel. These are the true feelings of a lousy man who values cheating on his wife with another woman more than his family. No wonder you left your daughter behind. You really think your crimes are alleviated because you left food for her? Scallon, how frickin' cruel and disgusting can you get? What kind of a man who leaves his daughter to fawn over a woman is just going to reopen his mouth? What you did is something that could have gotten you arrested by the police, and I'm not kidding. Perhaps Grant finally realized the gravity of what he had done when I mentioned the word police, and he agreed to the divorce. But his stupidity didn't end there.
I'll agree to the divorce, but you have to let me see Iris. If you don't agree to that, I won't pay you child support.
I don't want child support. I don't want money from someone who's going to make money a condition to see his daughter.
Then I won't do it. I won't.
By all means, Mr. Scallon, don't. We don't want anything to do with you. As long as you don't ever show your face to me or my daughter again, I'm all for that idea. Right. As I said that, my parents-in-law came into the room. I guess my own parents called them.
What do you mean you won't pay child support? That's the stupidest bullshit I ever heard.
You did something that should make you feel ashamed as a man. And paying alimony and child support is axiomatic. You should be paying double the normal amount of child support and double the amount of alimony by conventional standards. It's not that you should pay that much. It's that you will pay that much. I'm really sorry about all this stupid shit, Cassie dear.
Don't frickin' tell me what to do. I'm not gonna pay you anything. Not a single penny, you hear me? Then don't ever call yourself my son again. I'm frickin' disowning a piece of shit like you. I'm ashamed you were ever my son. You're crazy.
You're the one who's crazy. You bastard. I'm ashamed that Cassie is still seeing your face.
With that, my husband was dragged out of the hospital room by his parents. A few hours after they left, my lawyer came to see me, and together we finished up the legal procedures to demand Grant alimony and child support, and he took care of most of the rest. My in-laws were very cooperative, needless to say, and the result was that I was able to get more money than the conventional standard, just as Miss Scallon said I would. My husband's lover was indeed a junior at his company, and my detective friends sent a certified letter to that company. I'm still so grateful to my friend for finding that much evidence against Grant's infidelity, and I owe so much to him. Thanks to the content-certified letter, the woman was transferred to a regional office somewhere in the countryside on the outskirts of some remote town, and my husband was assigned to work next to a window, which is to say he's only taking care of miscellaneous things and isn't actually doing real work. I also demanded alimony from the woman whom Grant was having an affair with. She was insisting on not paying, so we contacted her new workplace through my lawyer, and we arranged for the money to be deducted from her paycheck. Because Grant had been having an affair at work, and it's hard for him to stay working there right now, the woman who he had the affair with seems to be holding a grudge against him because of my demanding alimony from her, and spreading the contents of their messages, photos, to their head office. The alimony was paid to me in one lump sum, and she quit the company soon thereafter. I don't know what she's doing now. My husband also paid alimony and child support in one lump sum, so I never had to see him again. And I was discharged from the hospital without further complications, perhaps 10 days after the whole situation blew over. After I left the hospital, we went straight to my parents' home. I decided to stay with my parents for a while because I was afraid my daughter might miss me if I went back to work immediately. When I told my daughter that her daddy and I had divorced, she said,
If you're there for me, Mommy, I'm so happy with that. That's all I want. And even if you get lonely, I'll be here for you.
She was the one who had suffered a traumatizing experience of being abandoned alone in a large house. But her words were so kind and so brave that it made me realize how grown up my little girl was already. I was so proud of her, and I still am so proud of her, and I will continue to be there for her as she grows up to become a beautiful, compassionate, independent lady. I'm keeping in touch with my in-laws, who have always been very kind to me and to their granddaughter. Iris not only has me to guide her, but she also has 2 sets of wonderful, loving grandparents. Wish us luck, everyone.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my 2nd year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.